Treasurer, welcome.
Good to be here.
Now, the deficit this financial year is $50 billion and next financial year it's $22 billion. That's larger than you had anticipated, yet you want us to focus on a $3.5 billion surplus in 2 years' time. Why should people do that?
Well, because we're serious about coming back to surplus in 2012-13 and we've taken the very serious decisions in this budget to do that, despite the revenue write-downs, $16 billion over the first 2 years, revenue write-downs which are caused by natural disasters but also by the lingering effects of the global financial crisis. So despite all of that, we are still coming back to surplus in 2012-13, and the reason we are doing that, Chris, is because we've put in place the biggest fiscal consolidation, that is, return to surplus, we have seen since records have been kept. 3.8% of GDP over 2 years.
But if you could miss your mark by $8 billion this year and $10 billion the next, anything like that would see you miss your surplus by a considerable mark in 2 years' time. So why can't we just focus on the now rather than never?
Well, because we have to focus on the forward estimates and we also have to focus on our fiscal rules. There is nothing that we can do about the revenue write-downs, which are the hangover of the global financial crisis. But there is something that we can do about our own spending. And what we have done is put in place the strictest discipline, very strict discipline. Spending growth is averaging 1% over the budget estimates each year, just 1%. When Peter Costello and Mr Howard were there, it was averaging 3.5%. And we are maintaining that 2% cap, even when the economy is going to be growing at 4%.
Sure, but in removing money from the economy, you have to remove a fair amount to have an effect, don't you? And what's the net save over the course of the next 4 years over the forward estimates?
The net save in this budget, when we take into account the saves on the one hand and our spending decisions, is we come out $5 billion ahead. We have not seen an outcome.
Over 4 budgets, that's a vanishingly small amount of money.
Over 4 years.
Over 4 years. Yeah. And that's in $2 trillion worth of spending.
No, that is not a small amount. That is not a small amount at all. Not a small amount when you are dealing with a revenue write-down over the first 2 years of $16 billion. It means we have to come racing back. And don't forget that growth in this year, which we had expected to be 3.25%, is down at something like 2.25%. That has knock-on effects to next year, despite the dead weight, if you like, of the revenue write-downs, despite the cost of the natural disasters, despite all of those things, we are actually coming back to surplus. We had been advised by many economists to be not too particular about coming back to surplus. There's a very important reason we're doing that, because we have this very big investment pipeline coming on, and what we have to do is to make sure we don't compound any of those pressures.
But to finish on this, $5 billion over 4 years is half of your first stimulus package, so really it's not going to have a huge effect on the economy as a whole, is it?
Well, our position is already contractionary. That's the point. We are already withdrawing resources from the economy. So we have got a very tight fiscal policy in place, a tight fiscal policy that could not be replicated by our predecessors and certainly can't be matched by our current opposition, who somehow claim they can magically come back to surplus next year. Well, I'd like to see that.
Now, the economics of this are very, very good indeed. Good growth, 4.5%, under 5% unemployment, 500,000 jobs, you say. Where will we find the workers to feed that?
Well, unemployment will come down to 4.5%. That's why we don't have an Australian to waste. And that is why, given the growth outlook, given the employment growth, the strong jobs growth we're going to see, we've already had something like 750,000 jobs created in this country in our period of government, when in other countries unemployment has been 8 and 9 and 10%. One of the reasons we are in such a strong position is that we haven't had the capital destruction and the skill destruction that comes with a prolonged recession. So we are now in a position to take advantage of all of that, which is why the centrepiece of the budget tonight is jobs, jobs and jobs, the training
and
initiatives,
where do you get the workers?
skills
because
initiatives.
You want to move people from welfare to work, but you can't move them really rapidly,
Absolutely.
can you?
And therefore you do have skill shortages and labour shortages in an economy which is rapidly expanding.